Thank you so much. I'm going to adjust this. This is our clicker. The clicker has a button that says laser, which I would like to press, but maybe I'll wait for the right moment. Hi, my name is Cassandra Gillig. I'm a new scholar, but prior to returning to grad school, I was the librarian for 10 years. So I think the way that I approach everything is as a librarian. And I'm deeply soothed to be in this room full of gigantic nerds. So thank you for joining me. Before I start, I want to thank Brenda Marston, the curator of the Human Sexuality Collection at Cornell University. I received a fellowship over the summer to go visit these collections that are completely amazing and completely the result of the labor of Brenda advocating for queer and trans materials to be preserved at Cornell. I think that people often don't understand the political work that's involved in advocating for these materials to actually be preserved and be important and be viewed. So most of the photographs that I'm going to share with you today are from those collections. And this opening slide here, you can see on the left, I've got the Stone Butch Blues. The joke name of my talk, I Have Stone Butch Blues, actually has a lineage in pin jokes. And on the right here, we have a photograph of Leslie Feinberg, the author of Stone Butch Blues, reading at Charis Books in Atlanta, which is the oldest women's bookstore in the South. Yeah, still going strong, absolutely. You can still buy Stone Butch Blues at Charis Books. In 1992, at the encouragement of lesbian feminist writers Amber Hollabaugh, Jewel Gomez, and Dorothy Ellison, Leslie Feinberg wrote to Nancy Bariano, the editor and publisher of Firebrand Books. Feinberg was sending off the first draft of Stone Butch Blues, her debut foray into fiction writing after spending years as a factory worker, typesetter, organizer, and editor for the Workers' World newspaper. Before the sex debates of the last 10 years, I don't think this novel would have been taken seriously in the lesbian feminist community, she wrote. Working class butch women and women who lived by passing as men were suspect in that movement. Like lesbian women of color and working class lesbians generally, we were seen as marginal even though we actually make up the vast majority. Feinberg spoke from the painfully well-occupied margins of what was already a deeply marginalized movement, and in this, she was able to activate a devoted readership that persists to this day. Here we have a photograph of that letter I was reading from, and one of the things I really like about this is you can see kind of the intimacy of the press. Through the second page here, we have Leslie giving her home phone number. This was really just a letter sent to someone who she was encountering in the world. Met with immediate acclaim and positive sales, Stone Butch Blues remains one of the most enduringly read and widely discussed titles from the lesbian print movement. Though widely canonized for its novelistic content, this talk shifts focus to consider the publication infrastructure that has allowed Stone Butch Blues to find a permanent home everywhere from community reading groups to university classrooms. After selling 60,000 copies in its first 7 years in print, the novel struggled with the closure of 2 different indie publishers that left Feinberg in copyright battles and eventually resulted in her choice to self-publish free and at-cost versions. Reading Stone Butch Blues' publication records, editorial correspondence, contracts, fan mail, desk copy requests, and marketing materials, one comes to understand the components of a genre-changing independent press bestseller. Stone Butch Blues offers a significant case study in the end of the LGBT small press movement, exemplifying the ways that minoritized literary titles can signal changing political tides and catalyze new field formations. Here we have another photo of Leslie to the left, and then this photo on the right is actually a still photo from when Leslie appeared with Kate Bornstein on the Joan Rivers show in the early 90s. So that's the book stylized for public presentation. Next, there are probably some fake flowers. Published by Firebrand Books in March 1993, amidst a tumultuous year for trans activism, Stone Butch Blues laid the groundwork for a new contemporary trans literature. Its story traces the life of Jess Goldberg, a working-class butch who finds community in the 50s Buffalo, New York lesbian bar scene. Goldberg navigates the precarious employment and danger attached to her gender nonconformity, the decision to start and stop medically transitioning, and the lifelong project of coming into one's own inside the expectations of a lesbian community and broader world. Feinberg's bio famously stated she was a, quote, anti-racist, white, working class, secular, Jewish, transgender, lesbian, female, revolutionary communist. And she built the complexities of these commitments and experiences into her work. Stone Butch Blues is a novel that always thinks beyond its protagonist, painting self-actualization alongside homophobic and transphobic police brutality, the racial politics of early lesbian spaces, labor organizing, and queer community building. Not without its critiques, both past and present, Stone Butch Blues remains a vital read in its ability to thread the changing tides of lesbian discourse across time. Feinberg's book took on doubly controversial subject matter. In 1993, longstanding debates on whether butch and femme lesbians detracted from the project of liberation were still of community concern. Feinberg's novel marries butch femme discourse with discussion of the nascent transgender liberation movement and alienation of trans people in lesbian circles. In her piece, Building Bridges, published in the first issue of groundbreaking lesbian trans feminist magazine Trans Sisters, Feinberg writes, I am a transgendered activist, I am a lesbian, I am the way I am, I love who I love, I have a right to be whole. Trying to choose one identity over the other would be as untenable as standing with a foot in each of two rowboats drifting apart. Much of Feinberg's work records the uphill battle of steadying oneself on this shaky terrain. Feinberg's 1992 pamphlet, Transgender Liberation, A Movement Whose Time Has Come, opens with a concise goal, quote, to trace the historic rise of an oppression that as yet has no commonly agreed upon name. As Feinberg would reiterate throughout her work, if you don't name an oppression, you can't fight it. This slippery project of pinning down trans and its associated histories is part of what drew Feinberg and other activists of the era to the term transgender. For Feinberg, transgender was a coalitional tool, something that could reach wide enough to make space for any person who had a different experience of gender. As Feinberg notes in the supplemental materials for the 20th anniversary of Stone Butch Blues, the word transgender evolved significantly in the 2 decades after its first use. Here we have 2 of Feinberg's early pamphlets, notably published by the Worldview Publishers, which was a print arm of the Workers' World Party, and you can see on the left here some of the ads for other titles they were putting out, also considered gay issues. Nancy Bariano started Firebrand Books in 1984, part of a new wave of presses interested in expanding the voices and discourses of lesbian publishing. These presses came into their editorial methodologies during the nascent sex wars, beginning of the AIDS crisis, and ever-dwindling public arts funding. Bariano's author roster was driven by a particularly generative kind of curiosity that pursued the fullest possible portrait of lesbian life and published writers as significant and varied as Audre Lorde, Dorothy Allison, and Alison Bechdel. The Firebrand Books records illustrate Nancy Bariano's meticulous record keeping, doubling as an outline of her overwhelming daily efforts in keeping the press afloat. Bariano's tasks included everything from responding to manuscripts to answering author inquiries, fulfilling review and desk copy requests, paying royalties, talking to distributors and printers, balancing finances, planning for printings, responding to fan mail, coordinating readings, pitching reviews, writing copy, and corresponding with authors. In the straightforward and comprehensive records of a small press, one comes to see the way that a book's livelihood can be dictated by the responsiveness and proactivity of its publisher. Working with a part-time assistant and the occasional contracted employee or intern, Bariano almost single-handedly supported her authors and often prioritized their royalty payments over the press's own financial security. By the end of its publishing tenure, Firebrand had over 80 books in print, managing massive amounts of logistics for each of their authors and books. Here you can see some of the kind of ways that Firebrand Books sought to establish itself. Lesbian literature on the reading edge. Every society honors its live conformists and its dead troublemakers. And then at the bottom of this pamphlet or handout on the left, we have Stone Butch Blues as it was sent out to a lot of people on the marketing list who would have been a lot of booksellers, a lot of past folks who bought directly from the press. 1993 was a watershed year in trans organizing, with the fight to include transgender people in the March on Washington for lesbian, gay, and bi rights, the beginning of activist group Transsexual Menace, and continuing protests of trans exclusion at the Michigan Women's Music Festival. Publishing a book like Stone Butch Blues at this time in lesbian and trans history was a clear political statement. Upon first receiving Feinberg's manuscript, Bariano stayed up all night reading it, something she'd never done with another. I read it on the power of what was in the book, Bariano detailed in an oral history with literary scholar Alec Pollock. Bariano didn't immediately recognize its political stakes, just knew that it was something that made her feel she had so much to learn. Here on the left, we have a flyer for the first release book signing party for Stone Butch Blues. Something that I think is really fantastic about this flyer is at the bottom it has all of the sponsoring committees. So you can see the level of community engagement. We have everything from ACT UP to a songwriter to Contemporary Arts Center. A lot of people have been working alongside Leslie in Buffalo for everything from reproductive rights to workers' rights, and she had made quite a community of people who shared her values. And then on the right, we have a photograph from Camp Trans, which is the counter-protest that was happening outside of the Michigan Women's Music Festival every year after 1991, after a trans woman was ejected from the festival. That's Leslie as the second person, and then the fourth person in this photograph is Jameson Green, who was the editor of the FTM newsletter and a very significant member in the organizing community. It's complicated to track and assemble a trans literary canon given the modern emergence of trans as an identity category and the myriad terms used to describe gender nonconformity over time. Considering both this and the novel's content, the marketing and professional copy for Stone Butch Blues is fittingly unable to develop consistent language in describing the book. When submitting Stone Butch Blues to the Library of Congress in January 1993, Firebrand described it as a, quote, novel exploring the complexities of being a transgendered person in a world demanding simple explanations. A month later, the book's ISBN application read, quote, a novel about a contemporary lesbian passing as a man in order to survive and then coming to terms with herself. While the book jacket's copy included a mixture of both, Stone Butch Blues' official press release doesn't use the word transgender, instead opting for, quote, differently gendered, passing as a man, and he, she. In both mainstream and gay press coverage, the range of terminology used demonstrates a still assembling vocabulary around the emergent category of transgender, which sometimes collapses sex, gender, and sexuality altogether. And here we have a spread of media representation. On the left, we have a local Buffalo paper. In the middle, we have Sojourner, which was a leftist women's magazine published out of the South. And then the third, we have the FTM newsletter, who Jameson Green in that last photo edited. So you can see kind of a shifting in understanding the work and stakes of Leslie here. The success of Stone Butch Blues was immediate. The novel sold out of its initial 5,000 copy print run in 90 days. The typical first run for a Firebrand book was 3,000 copies, and many of its authors never needed a second. In the course of its 7 years of being published by Firebrand, the novel sold over 60,000 copies. Stone Butch Blues found an audience of deeply engaged readers and made a place for gender nonconforming writing in lesbian spaces. In the wake of the novel's popularity, Firebrand would publish Minnie Bruce Pratt, Leslie Feinberg's partner's book Z in 1995, and Transsexual Menace co-founder Ricky Ann Wilkins' first book, Read My Lips, in 1997. These were two other significant titles in the non-academic theorizing and depiction of trans and gender nonconforming life. While Stone Butch Blues won a Lambda Literary Award for lesbian fiction in 1994, Lambda, the premier organization for gay and lesbian literature, would not include a transgender category until it was established as a catch-all award for fiction, nonfiction, and poetry in 1997. A trans fiction category would not arrive until 2009. Even in the years of academic books, essay collections, and memoirs that would follow, the trans-authored trans novel remained a particular outlier. A useful accompaniment to emerging curriculums on queer theory, one of the biggest forces of impact for Stone Butch Blues was its immediate uptake in the university. Looking through hundreds of requests for desk and exam copies, Stone Butch Blues proved a versatile course text that was beginning to be integrated into syllabi only a few months after its release. In 1994 alone, professors across nearly every type of institution in every part of the country proposed courses with the novel. It found applications across gender studies, history, philosophy, sociology, anthropology, English, environmental studies, legal studies, and health education. The novel is still regularly taught in classrooms today. In summer 2000, Nancy Bariano sold Firebrand books to LPC Group. As reported in Publishers Weekly, June and July of 2000 alone saw the Firebrand sale, the sale and downsizing of the oldest lesbian publisher at the time, Naiad Press, the end of longstanding trade publication Feminist Bookstore News, and the closure of Glad Day Bookshop, a Toronto LGBT bookstore that had been open since 1970. LPC Group defaulted on a $1 million loan and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in April 2002. In an expensive legal battle, Feinberg recovered the rights to Stone Butch Blues and sold them to LGBT small press publisher Ellison Books for republication. The 2003 Ellison Books edition of Stone Butch Blues reflects on the novel's life during its 10 years in print. Feinberg wrote, "When Stone Butch Blues was published, I thought I would keep cartons of copies in my closet to give out to people who were ready to read it. But this book, like the movements for social change it was inextricably connected with, exploded the closet door off its hinges." In the intervening decade, Feinberg received hundreds of thousands of letters, emails, and phone calls, the life of the book far outpacing any publication statistics one could offer. Ellison faced similar problems to Firebrand, however, and the distribution of Stone Butch Blues was once again placed into jeopardy when it was acquired by a massive and failing LGBT media conglomerate called Regent Media. Once again, forced into a legal battle over rights for the novel, Feinberg emerged with a commitment to prioritize publication of the work above all else. In the last months of Feinberg's life, she and her partner, poet and essayist Minnie Bruce Pratt, worked on 20th anniversary edition of Stone Butch Blues, dedicated to Cece McDonald, a Black trans activist who had been jailed on a predatory manslaughter charge after defending herself in an attack. This edition sought to create easy access in line with Feinberg's politics, but not in a way that might result, once again, in the book going out of print. In addition to a free PDF posted to Feinberg's website, the final edition of the book was made available for purchase at cost through print-on-demand site Lulu. In its note on copyrights, Feinberg wrote, "I have retained full author copyright to Stone Butch Blues rather than license this 20th anniversary edition through Creative Commons. The reason is not out of a fetish of ownership of property, but rather to protect my work from being exploited commercially by corporations." Here we have the 3 editions. Stone Butch Blues has had 930,000 downloads from Feinberg's site, is regularly purchased through print-on-demand channels, and is read in translations across nearly a dozen languages, all of which are also bound to Feinberg's commitment to free or at-cost access. At this point in its circulation, many more have encountered Stone Butch Blues in digital form than as a printed book. To this end, it has become one of the most widely read self-published novels outside of the genre and fan fiction worlds. As with the efforts of the first waves of gay and lesbian publishers, when the available publishing infrastructure was insufficient, Feinberg created her own. As Feinberg reflected in the 10th edition of Stone Butch Blues, "With this novel, I planted a flag. Here I am. Does anyone else want to discuss these important issues? I wrote it not as an expression of individual high art, but as a working class organizer mimeographs a leaflet, a call to action. More than anything, Stone Butch Blues was created as an urgent document and found a way to persist in whatever form it needed to take. Using the momentum around her work, first created by small press care, Feinberg built an infrastructure that has sustained her legacy long beyond her passing and introduced millions of new readers to Stone Butch Blues, creating the possibility for a new kind of trans literature along the way." And these are 2 photos of Feinberg later in life. You can see "Queers Don't Buy This War," and then on the right, we have her at a protest to free Cece McDonald, also on her sign, "Free Chelsea Manning, Ground the Drones." Throughout her life and throughout her book tours, Feinberg was always and adamantly injecting the room with her politics and with a call to not only read lesbian literature, read trans literature, but also to think critically about United States imperialism and the liberation of Palestinian people. I will end on that note. Thank you all so much.